The iron shackles bit into Lyrelai's wrists as the guards dragged her through the mud toward the crimson court of Valdris. The jeering crowd parted like vultures awaiting a feast, their eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. Today, they would witness the complete destruction of an Omega who had dared to exist in spaces where she didn't belong. "Move faster, wretch!" Guard Captain Theron yanked the chains harder, causing Lyrelai to stumble. Her knees hit the cobblestones, tearing through her already threadbare dress. Blood seeped through the fabric, but she didn't cry out. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only fed their hunger for her suffering. As they hauled her back to her feet, Lyrelai caught a glimpse of her reflection in a puddle. Hollow cheeks, silver eyes that had lost their light, and midnight hair matted with dirt. She barely recognized the ghost staring back. 3 days in the dungeons awaiting trial had transformed her from a palace servant into something even the rats pitied. But she hadn't committed the crime they accused her of. She would never steal from the royal treasury, no matter how desperate her situation. Yet here she was, about to face the High Council's judgment, with Lady Mortessa herself serving as her primary accuser. The Crimson Court loomed before them, a massive circular amphitheater carved from black obsidian, its walls stretching toward the sky like accusatory fingers. This was where justice died and spectacle thrived, where the powerful crushed the powerless for sport. Inside, hundreds had already gathered. The noble houses occupied the upper tiers, their silk garments rustling with excitement. The merchant class filled the middle sections, eager for drama to discuss in their shops. And scattered throughout, other Omegas watched in terror, knowing that tomorrow any one of them could be standing where Lyrelai stood. "Lyrelai Night Whisper!" The herald's voice boomed across the amphitheater. "You stand accused of high theft against the crown, conspiracy against your betters, and corruption of sacred spaces with your Omega filth." Omega filth. The words echoed in the vast space, each repetition a dagger to her soul. In the kingdom of Valdris, Omegas were barely considered human. They existed to serve, to bleed, to die quietly when their usefulness ended. Lady Mortessa rose from her seat among the council, her crimson robes billowing like spilled blood. Her perfectly manicured nails caught the light as she pointed at Lyrelai with theatrical disgust. "Behold the creature who dared to steal from our sacred treasury. This parasite who we foolishly allowed to clean our halls." The crowd hissed and booed. Someone threw a rotten apple that splattered against Lyrelai's shoulder. The guards didn't move to stop them. "I didn't steal anything." Lyrelai's voice came out as barely a whisper, hoarse from 3 days without water. "Silence!" Judge Aldrich slammed his gavel, his ancient face twisted with contempt. "Omega trash does not speak unless commanded." But Lyrelai raised her head, something flickering in those silver eyes. "I've served this palace for 8 years. I've scrubbed every stone, cleaned every chamber. I know my place, but I am not a thief." The audacity of her words sent shockwaves through the crowd. An Omega, defending herself, speaking without permission? Lady Mortessa's beautiful face contorted with rage. "You dare? You dare speak in this sacred court?" She turned to the crowd, arms spread wide. "See how the corruption spreads? This is why we must be harsh. This is why they must be reminded of their place." She snapped her fingers, and 2 massive guards stepped forward, each carrying leather whips studded with metal. The crowd's excitement reached a fever pitch. 20 lashes for speaking without permission," Judge Aldrich declared with satisfaction. "Then we continue with the evidence." As they forced Lyrelai to her knees, as they tore the back of her dress to expose her scarred skin, she caught movement in the royal box, a section shrouded in shadows where only the highest royalty sat. Someone was watching from behind the black silk curtains. Someone who had been absent from court proceedings for 3 years. The first lash came down with a crack, that echoed through the amphitheater. Lairali bit through her lip to keep from screaming. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. But as the second lash fell, as her blood began to paint the obsidian floor, a memory surfaced unbidden. A night 2 years before the purge when she'd saved a young man from drowning in the Thornwood River. His face had been obscured by blood and moonlight, but his eyes, those golden eyes had burned into her memory before he'd disappeared into the night. The third lash tore through old scars, and this time a small cry escaped her lips. The crowd cheered. In the royal box, someone shifted forward. The whip came down for the fourth time, and Lyrelai's vision blurred with unshed tears. Each strike was calculated to maximize pain without causing death. The guards were experts at keeping victims conscious through all 20 lashes. "Look at her bleed!" someone shouted from the crowd. "Omega blood for Omega crimes!" Lady Mortessa circled Lyrelai like a predator savoring its prey. This creature was found with her hands in the royal vault. 50 golden crescents hidden in her pathetic quarters. The evidence is undeniable. "Planted," Lyrelai gasped between strikes. The coins were planted. Crack! The fifth lash silenced her words. "Moreover," Lady Mortessa continued, her voice dripping with venom, "she was seen lurking near the Prince Regent's chambers last moon. Suspicious behavior for a mere cleaning girl, wouldn't you say?" The crowd murmured their agreement. In Valdris, proximity to power without permission was almost as grave as theft. Judge Aldrich leaned forward, his yellowed teeth visible in a grotesque smile. "Tell us, Lady Mortessa, what else have you discovered about this creature's activities?" But before Mortessa could respond, a voice cut through the amphitheater, deep, commanding, and laced with an authority that made everyone's spine straighten. "Enough." The single word wasn't shouted, wasn't even particularly loud, yet it carried to every corner of the Crimson Court. The guard's whip froze mid-swing. The crowd fell silent as death itself. From the royal box, a figure emerged from behind the silk curtains. Alpha King Zephyr Darkmoon stepped into the light, and the entire amphitheater dropped to their knees. Everyone except Lyrelai, who couldn't move from her position. No one had seen the Alpha King in public for 3 years, not since the assassination attempt that had nearly claimed his life. Rumors said he'd been disfigured, weakened, possibly even dead with a puppet ruler in his place. But the man who stood before them now radiated power like a barely contained storm. Tall and broad-shouldered, with midnight black hair that fell to his shoulders, and those distinctive golden eyes that marked the Dark Moon bloodline. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, the only visible reminder of the attempt on his life. Instead of diminishing him, it made him look like what he was, a predator among sheep. "Your Majesty!" Judge Aldrich's voice trembled as he remained bowed. We weren't expecting..." Clearly. Zephyr's voice could have frozen flame. "Rise." The court slowly got to their feet, though no one dared meet his eyes directly. No one except Lyrelai, who watched through pain-hazed vision as he descended the stairs with lupine grace. "Continue with your trial," he said, though something in his tone suggested it wasn't truly a suggestion. "I'm curious to see how justice is dispensed in my absence." Lady Mortessa recovered first, though her confident demeanor cracked slightly. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your presence. This Omega quote has a name, does she not?" Mortessa blinked. Yes. Lyrelai Nightwhisper, Your Majesty. She stands accused of..." "I heard the charges." Zephyr moved closer to the center of the court, his boots clicking against obsidian. "I'm more interested in the evidence." "You say 50 golden crescents were found?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Hidden beneath her sleeping mat, wrapped in palace linens she had no right to possess. "Interesting." The Alpha King's gaze swept over Lyrali's bleeding form. "And this Omega, this servant who makes What? Perhaps 2 silver crescents a month? She somehow acquired 50 gold ones? That's nearly 10 years' wages. Stolen, Your Majesty, Mortessa insisted, from the royal vault. The royal vault that requires 3 keys to open? The one guarded by 12 of my elite warriors? The one protected by blood magic that would kill anyone not of royal blood who tried to enter without permission? Silence stretched through the amphitheater. Mortessa's face paled. She must have found a way. Must have? Zephyr's voice dropped dangerously. You bring charges that carry a death sentence on must have. Judge Aldrich cleared his throat. Your Majesty, with respect, the evidence. Was the vault actually breached? Zephyr interrupted. Is anything actually missing? Another silence. Longer this time. Well? The Alpha King's patience was clearly wearing thin. Technically, Aldrich admitted reluctantly, the vault inventory showed no discrepancies. But the gold was found in her quarters. So you're telling me, Zephyr said slowly, as if explaining to children, that this Omega stole gold from a vault that shows nothing missing, through barriers that would have killed her instantly, past guards who reported nothing unusual. The logic was irrefutable. The crowd began to murmur uneasily. Lady Mortessa's composure finally cracked completely. She's an Omega. They're all thieves and liars. She must be punished as an example. Ah! The single syllable from the Alpha King carried volumes. So this isn't about justice. It's about reminder, about keeping the Omegas in line through fear. He walked closer to where Lyrelei knelt, and for the first time she saw his face clearly. Those golden eyes. God help her, she knew those eyes. The recognition must have shown on her face because something flickered in his expression. There and gone so fast she might have imagined it. Can she stand? He asked the guards. She's had only 5 lashes, Your Majesty. She can stand. Then let her. The guards hauled Lyrelei to her feet, and she swayed but remained upright through sheer will. This close, even through the pain, she could smell him. Pine forests and winter storms and something wild that made her Omega instincts both cower and yearn. Look at me, he commanded. She raised her silver eyes to meet his golden ones. The world stopped. The Alpha King stood motionless, his golden eyes boring into Lyrelei's silver ones with an intensity that made the air itself hold its breath. Something passed between them, a recognition, a memory, a secret that belonged to no one else in this amphitheater full of hungry spectators. Your Majesty? Lady Mortessa's voice cracked with uncertainty. Shall we continue with the punishment? Zephyr didn't move, didn't even acknowledge she'd spoken. His entire focus remained on the bloodied Omega before him. Tell me, he said, his voice low enough that only those closest could hear. Do you know how to swim? The question was so unexpected, so bizarrely out of place, that gasps echoed through the crowd. But Lyrelei's eyes widened with something beyond pain, understanding. Yes, she whispered, and her voice grew stronger. I learned in the Thornwood River, where the current runs strongest. The Alpha King's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The Thornwood River, where the moon lilies bloom in winter. Where the water runs so cold it can stop a heart, Lyrelei continued, the words pulling from some deep place, but also start one anew. The crowd was utterly baffled by this exchange, but Lady Mortessa sensed danger in it. Your Majesty, perhaps we should... Silence. The command rang with alpha power, the kind that could bring lesser wolves to their knees. Mortessa stumbled backward, her hand clutching her throat as if the word itself had choked her. Zephyr slowly circled Lyrelei, examining her like one might study a puzzle with missing pieces. You've been a servant here for 8 years, the records say. Yes, Your Majesty. Yet you speak with education. Your posture, even beaten and bloodied, shows training. You're not pack-born to servitude." Judge Aldrich interjected desperately. "Many Omegas pretend to be more than they are." I said silence. This time the alpha power was directed at him, and the old judge collapsed into his chair wheezing. Zephyr's attention never left Liralai. What happened to the House of Moonfall? The question hit Liralai like a physical blow. Her carefully constructed mask of submission cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "The House of Moonfall died in the Purge of Silver Night, Your Majesty. Every member of the bloodline was executed for treason." "Every member?" His voice was soft, dangerous. "Every single one?" "The histories say so. The histories lie." The crowd erupted in shocked whispers. The Purge of Silver Night was established fact. 8 years ago, the House of Moonfall had conspired against the crown. Every member from elder to infant had been executed. It was the kingdom's darkest justice, but justice nonetheless. Lady Mortessa found her voice again, though it trembled. "Your Majesty, surely you're not suggesting—" "I'm not suggesting anything," Zephyr cut her off. "I'm stating facts. The House of Moonfall was betrayed, not traitorous. They were murdered, not executed, and someone survived." His eyes remained locked on Liralai. Someone with distinctive silver eyes that only appeared in that bloodline. Someone who would have been 19 during the Purge, old enough to remember, young enough to hide among common Omegas. Liralai's composure finally shattered completely. "You can't prove anything." "Can't I?" The Alpha King smiled, but it wasn't kind. "Tell me, Lady Mortessa, when did this servant begin working in the palace?" Mortessa fumbled with a ledger. 8 years ago, Your Majesty, just weeks after the Purge." "Convenient. And her documentation?" "Standard Omega registration. Parents unknown, pack affiliation none, birthplace listed as the outer villages." "How thorough." Zephyr's voice dripped sarcasm. "An Omega with no past, no family, no pack, appears just as a noble house is wiped out. No one questioned this?" "She's just an Omega," Mortessa protested. "Why would anyone?" "Because," the Alpha King interrupted, his voice rising to fill the entire amphitheater. "The House of Moonfall was destroyed on false evidence, evidence that I've spent 3 years investigating. Evidence that led me to one conclusion: someone in this court orchestrated their downfall." The amphitheater exploded into chaos. Accusations flew, denials rang out, and through it all, Liralai stood frozen, her secret laid bare before hundreds of witnesses. "Enough!" Zephyr's roar silenced them all. "Lady Mortessa, you served as a junior prosecutor during the Moonfall trial. Did you not?" All color drained from Mortessa's face. Yes, Your Majesty, but—" "And Judge Aldrich, you presided over it." The old judge gripped his podium. "Following the evidence presented. Evidence you never verified. Witnesses you never properly questioned. A rush to judgment that saw 17 people murdered in one night, including 3 children under the age of 10. His words fell like executioner's axes, each one cutting deeper than the last. "But we're not here to retry old crimes," Zephyr continued, his voice deceptively calm. "We're here for this trial. So let me ask something different. Lady Mortessa, where were you 3 nights ago when the gold was supposedly discovered in the servant quarters?" I was attending the Northern Lords' gathering." "Interesting. And who discovered the gold?" "Guard Captain Theron, during a routine inspection." "Routine." Zephyr turned to Theron, who had gone pale as death. "How often do you inspect servant quarters, Captain?" Every month, Your Majesty." "Yet records show the last inspection was 4 months ago." Theron's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. "So not routine at all." In fact, specifically targeted at this one servant. Almost as if you knew what you would find. The Alpha King's smile was all predator now. Or as if you put it there yourself. That's absurd, Mortessa shrieked. You can't prove. Actually, Zephyr reached into his coat and pulled out a rolled parchment. I can. This is a signed testimony from Marcus Wilde, your personal guard, Lady Mortessa. He's confessed to placing the gold on your orders. He's very detailed about how you've been systematically targeting certain servants, particularly this one, ever since you recognized her silver eyes 3 moons ago. The crowd gasped. Mortessa stumbled backward. You knew who she was, Zephyr continued relentlessly. A survivor of the family you helped destroy. You feared she might remember something, might have evidence of your crimes. So you decided to eliminate her through false charges, just as you eliminated her family. Lies! Mortessa screamed. That guard is lying. I'll have his head. He's under my protection, Zephyr said coldly. And he's not the only one talking. Amazing what people confess when facing the Alpha King's justice instead of this mockery of a court. He turned back to Lyrelai, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. You saved my life once, in the Thornwood River, 10 years ago, 2 years before the Purge. A collective intake of breath swept through the amphitheater. I was investigating corruption in the eastern provinces, he continued, loud enough for all to hear. Someone didn't want me to find the truth. They sent assassins. I was poisoned, wounded, drowning, and a 17-year-old girl who shouldn't have been anywhere near that river pulled me from the water, stayed with me through the night, disappeared before dawn. His hand rose toward her face but stopped just short of touching. I never saw your face clearly through the blood and poison. But I remember your eyes, silver like moonlight on water. I've been searching for you for 6 years, ever since I recovered and discovered the connection between that assassination attempt and the Moonfall massacre. Your Majesty, Lyrelai began, but he cut her off. The woman who stands accused here, his voice rang with absolute authority, is Lady Lyrelai of the House of Moonfall, last surviving heir of a noble bloodline falsely accused and murdered. Omega by designation, but noble by birth. And more importantly, he paused, letting the moment stretch. She is under my personal protection. Any crime against her is a crime against the crown itself. But before anyone could process this revelation, Mortessa pulled a blade from her robes, its edge gleaming with an oily sheen that promised more than just death. If I'm going down, she's coming with me. She lunged at Lyrelai with inhuman speed. The poisoned blade flashed in the torchlight, its arc aimed directly at Lyrelai's throat. Time seemed to slow, the crowd's screams stretching into an endless wail. Lyrelai, weakened from the lashing and shocking revelations, couldn't move fast enough to dodge. But Zephyr could. The Alpha King moved with inhuman speed, his body blurring as he intercepted the strike. The blade meant for Lyrelai's throat pierced his shoulder instead, sinking deep into muscle. Blood bloomed across his white shirt like spilled wine. No! Lyrelai's scream tore from her throat as Zephyr's arms wrapped around her, shielding her with his own body as they fell. Mortessa yanked the blade free for another strike, her face twisted with madness. You destroyed everything, my position, my future. She never finished the sentence. Guard Captain Theron, perhaps seeing a chance for redemption, tackled her from behind. But Mortessa was faster than any normal human should be, twisting free and slashing across his face. Theron fell back screaming, clutching his ruined eye. She's using dark enhancement, someone shouted. She's made a pact with shadow wolves. The accusation sent ripples of terror through the crowd. Shadow wolves were the ancient enemies of the kingdom, creatures of dark magic who granted power in exchange for souls. Mortessa's beautiful features began to shift, becoming something monstrous. Her nails elongated into claws, her teeth sharpened to fangs. "You think you know the truth, boy king?" She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "You know nothing. The shadow wolves have been among you for years. The Moonfall family discovered us, so they had to die. And now, so do you." She lunged again, but this time Zephyr was ready. Despite his wounded shoulder, he rose to meet her, his own transformation instantaneous. Where Mortessa became monster, he became apex predator, a massive black wolf with golden eyes that burned like stars. The two collided in the center of the court, a whirlwind of fangs and claws. The crowd scrambled backward, trampling each other to escape the violence. But Lyrelay couldn't move, transfixed by the sight of the Alpha King fighting for their lives. Mortessa was enhanced by dark magic, her strike supernaturally fast, her strength beyond normal limits. She landed several blows, opening gashes along Zephyr's flanks. But he was the Alpha King for a reason. Each of his counterstrikes was precise, calculated, wearing her down. "Your Majesty needs help," Judge Aldrich cried, though he made no move to provide it himself. The royal guards finally mobilized, surrounding the combatants, but they couldn't get a clear shot without risking their king. It was Lirali who saw the opening. As Mortessa reared back for a killing blow, her stance left her left side exposed for just a heartbeat. Without thinking, Lirelai grabbed a shard of broken stone from the court floor and hurled it with all her remaining strength. The makeshift weapon struck Mortessa's eye. She howled, stumbling, and that moment of distraction was all Zephyr needed. His jaws closed around her throat, and with one powerful shake, it was over. Mortessa's body fell to the obsidian floor, already beginning to dissolve into shadow and ash, the fate of all who made pacts with the dark. Zephyr shifted back to human form, breathing heavily, blood streaming from multiple wounds. But his eyes immediately sought Lyrelai. "Are you hurt?" "You're asking me?" She struggled to her feet, gesturing at his injuries. "You took a blade for me." "I would take 1,000. The words slipped out before he could stop them, raw and honest in a way that made the remaining crowd gasp. Judge Aldrich, finally finding his courage now that the danger had passed, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, this changes nothing regarding the trial." Zephyr's head snapped toward him, and the judge immediately fell silent at the fury in those golden eyes. "This changes everything," the Alpha King said, his voice deadly quiet. "We've just witnessed Lady Mortessa confess to framing Lady Lirelai. We've seen her reveal herself as shadow corrupted. We've heard her admit to orchestrating the Moonfall massacre." He stood slowly, majestically despite his wounds. "But more than that, we've seen the truth of this court. How quickly you all gathered to watch an innocent woman be tortured. How eagerly you believed lies without question. How ready you were to spill blood for entertainment." His gaze swept the amphitheater, and many couldn't meet it. "Judge Aldrich, you will step down from your position immediately, pending investigation into your role in the Moonfall trial. Every case you've presided over in the last 8 years will be reviewed." "You can't," Aldrich began. "I am the Alpha King. I can do whatever I deem necessary for justice." Zephyr's voice carried absolute authority. "And speaking of justice," he turned back to Lirelai, and his expression softened. "Lady Lirelai of House Moonfall, you are cleared of all charges. Your titles, lands, and position are hereby restored." Lirali swayed on her feet. "I don't understand. After all this time, why reveal yourself for me?" "Because I've been investigating the Moonfall massacre for 3 years, but I've been searching for you for 6 years," he admitted, his voice low enough that only she and those closest could hear. "The woman who saved my life and disappeared. I knew you had silver eyes, knew you were connected to the Moonfall family somehow, but you hid yourself well." "I had to." They were hunting any survivors. I know. That's why I stayed away from court, conducted my investigation in secret. Every time I got close to the truth, another witness would die or disappear. But when I heard about this trial, about an Omega with silver eyes facing death, he grimaced, pressing a hand to his wounded shoulder. I couldn't stay hidden anymore. Your Majesty, one of the guards interrupted urgently. You need medical attention. Zephyr waved him off, his eyes never leaving Lyrelai. There's something else. Something I need to say before. He suddenly staggered, his face paling. The blade. Mortessa's blade. The crowd gasped as black veins began spreading from his shoulder wound. Shadow wolf venom, Lyrelai breathed in horror. The blade was poisoned. Zephyr fell to one knee, his breathing labored. Should have known. Get the healers! Lyrelai screamed, catching him as he collapsed against her. His blood soaked through her torn dress, mixing with her own. Please, someone help him. The court erupted into chaos. Healers rushed forward, guards formed protective circles, and the crowd pressed closer despite the danger. Don't you dare die, Lyrelai whispered fiercely, cradling his head in her lap. Not now. Not when I finally found you again. His golden eyes flickered up to meet hers, and he managed a weak smile. Bossy for an Omega. I'm not just any Omega, she replied through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. I'm a Moonfall. We're notoriously stubborn. Good, he breathed, his voice fading. You'll need to be. The Shadow Wolves. This was just the beginning. They're planning something bigger. The corruption goes deeper than anyone knows. Then stay alive and help me stop them. But his eyes were already closing, his breathing becoming dangerously shallow. The healers worked frantically, but the black veins continued spreading, reaching toward his heart. Master Healer Cassian looked up grimly. The venom is too strong. Traditional healing won't work. We need... What? Lyrelai demanded. What do you need? Moon-blessed blood, he said reluctantly, from someone of pure, noble lineage, untouched by shadow. But the only family with that trait was... Moonfall, Lyrelai finished. Without hesitation, she grabbed a ceremonial dagger from a guard's belt and sliced across her palm. Use mine. My lady, you're already weak from the lashing. This could kill you. Then we die together, she said firmly, pressing her bleeding hand over Zephyr's wound. But I don't think we will. The moon doesn't bring us together just to tear us apart. Her blood dripped onto his poisoned flesh, and something extraordinary happened. The moment Lyrelai's blood touched Zephyr's wound, silver light erupted from the point of contact. The amphitheater filled with gasps as the light spread like liquid starlight, racing through the black veins of poison, purifying them, transforming them into threads of pure luminescence. Impossible, Master Healer Cassian breathed. The moon blessing was thought to be legend. But it was happening before their eyes. Lyrali's blood didn't just neutralize the poison, it seemed to recognize Zephyr, embracing him like a long-lost friend. The Alpha King's body arched as the power coursed through him, his own golden aura rising to meet her silver light. Where the two energies touched, they danced, intertwined, created something new and ancient at once. The very air in the Crimson Court shimmed with power not seen for centuries. Look! Someone pointed at the sky visible through the amphitheater's open roof. Despite it being midday, the moon had appeared, full and luminous, directly above them. Lyrelai gasped as memories flooded her mind, not just her own, but ancestral memories passed down through Moonfall blood. She saw the truth. Centuries ago, the Moonfall line and the Dark Moon dynasty were bound by sacred magic. They were meant to rule together, one representing the Knight's mercy, the other its strength. But politics and greed had driven them apart. weakening both bloodlines. The prophecy, Judge Aldrich whispered, his earlier antagonism replaced by awe. When moon and shadow reunite, when silver blood saves golden heart, the realm shall know its true protectors once more. Zephyr's eyes snapped open, no longer just golden but flecked with silver stars. He sat up slowly, the wound on his shoulder completely healed, leaving only a mark that looked like a crescent moon. His gaze found Lyrelai, who swayed from blood loss and exhaustion. "You remember?" he said softly, catching her before she could fall. "You remember everything now." She nodded weakly. "The night my family died. You were there. You tried to stop it. They poisoned you too, threw you in the river to die. I pulled you out, but I was just 19, terrified, didn't know who to trust. So I hid you, healed you with what little moon blessing I could access, then ran. You saved me twice now." His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "My stubborn, brave moonlight." "Your Majesty," Captain Erickson of the Royal Guard stepped forward hesitantly. "What are your orders regarding—" He gestured at the chaos around them, the dissolved remains of Mortessa, the terrified crowd, the uncertain guards. Zephyr stood, lifting Lyrelai effortlessly in his arms despite her weak protest. His voice rang with command. "Seal the court. No one leaves until they've been questioned under truth compulsion. We have Shadow Wolf collaborators to root out." "You can't hold us all," someone shouted from the crowd. "We're nobility." "Nobility who stood by while an innocent was tortured," Zephyr replied coldly. "Consider yourselves fortunate I don't charge you all as accomplices." He turned to address the entire amphitheater. "Let this be perfectly clear. The old ways die today. The systematic oppression of Omegas, the corruption that allowed Shadow Wolves to infiltrate our highest offices, the mockery of justice this court has become. It all ends now." "And her?" Judge Aldrich pointed at Lyrelai with a shaking finger. "What of the Omega? I mean, Lady Moonfall?" Something dangerous flashed in Zephyr's eyes. What of her indeed? He shifted his grip on Lyrelai, holding her more securely against his chest. She was unconscious now, her silver hair spilling over his arm like liquid moonlight. The sight of her, broken, bloodied but still radiant, seemed to make a decision for him. "Lord Chancellor Ravens," he called out, and an elderly man in deep blue robes stepped forward. "You witness this?" "I do, Your Majesty." "Then let all witness." Zephyr's voice carried to every corner of the amphitheater. "I, Zephyr Darkmoon, Alpha King of Valdris, claim Lady Lyrelai of House Moonfall as my chosen mate." The crowd erupted in shock. Claiming a mate was sacred, unbreakable. But for an Alpha King to claim someone publicly, without courtship, without the traditional trials— "She hasn't accepted," someone protested. "The claiming isn't valid unless—" "Then I'll wait for her answer," Zephyr said simply. "But know this, she is under my protection. Any slight against her is a declaration of war against the crown. Any whisper of discrimination because of her Omega status will be considered treason." He began walking toward the exit, still carrying Lyrelai. "Captain Erickson, have my personal chambers prepared for Lady Moonfall's recovery. Summon the best healers. And find me every document related to the Moonfall massacre, sealed records, hidden testimonies, everything." "Your Majesty," Master Healer Cassian hurried after him. "The moon blessing she used. It's changed something in both of you. The bonding has already begun on a magical level. If she doesn't accept your claim—" "Then I'll bear the consequences," Zephyr said firmly. "She's suffered enough for one lifetime. She'll make her choice freely, without pressure." As they reached the archway leading out of the amphitheater, a figure emerged from the shadows. An elderly woman in servant's garb, but her bearing was anything but servile. Your Majesty, she said, dropping to one knee, I am Rosanna, former headmaid of House Moonfall. I've been hiding in plain sight, watching over Lady Lyrelei these 8 years. Zephyr studied her carefully. You knew who she was? I helped her hide, gave her false documents, taught her to suppress her noble bearing. I thought keeping her as an invisible Omega was the only way to keep her safe. Tears streamed down the woman's weathered face. I failed her. You kept her alive? Zephyr corrected gently. That's not failure. Walk with us. She'll want familiar faces when she wakes. As they left the amphitheater, more figures began emerging from the crowd. Servants, guards, even some minor nobles, all kneeling, all confessing they'd known or suspected the truth about the Moonfall massacre but had been too frightened to speak. The Shadow Wolf's grip was stronger than we realized, Captain Erickson murmured. How many more Mortessas are out there? We'll find them all, Zephyr promised darkly. Every last one. In his arms, Lyreli stirred slightly, her hand unconsciously gripping his shirt. Even unconscious, she sought his strength. The moon mark on his shoulder pulsed with warm light in response. They reached the palace proper, and servants scattered at the sight of their king carrying a bloodied woman. But Zephyr didn't stop until they reached his personal chambers, a place no one but his most trusted had entered in 3 years. As Rosanna and the healers worked to clean and treat Lyrelei's wounds properly, Zephyr stood guard, his eyes never leaving her face. Chancellor Ravens approached cautiously. Your Majesty, claiming her publicly like that. There will be political ramifications. The noble houses who wanted their daughters to be queen can challenge me for the throne if they're brave enough, Zephyr finished. I'm done playing politics while shadow wolves corrupt our kingdom from within. Lyrelei is the key to stopping them. How can you be so sure? Zephyr's hand went to the moon mark on his shoulder. Because the moment her blood touched mine, I saw things. The shadow wolves aren't just random corruptions. They're organized, planning something massive. And the Moonfall family didn't just discover them by accident. They were investigating them, had found their main stronghold. Where? That's what Mortessa and her allies killed them to hide. But Lyrelei knows. It's locked in her memories, protected by moon blessing. When she wakes, when she's strong enough, we'll find it. A soft moan from the bed drew everyone's attention. Lyrelei's eyes fluttered open, no longer purely silver but now carrying flecks of gold, a mirror to Zephyr's own transformed gaze. Did you just... Her voice was hoarse. Did you claim me as your mate in front of the entire court? Despite everything, Zephyr's lips quirked in a small smile. I did. Without asking me first? Would you have preferred I let them continue calling you Omega Filth? She struggled to sit up, Rosanna quickly supporting her. I would have preferred not to be unconscious for one of the most important moments of my life. Then shall I do it again? Before anyone could protest, Zephyr knelt beside the bed, taking her hand gently in his. Lady Lyrelei of House Moonfall, survivor of tragedy, bearer of moon blessing, and quite possibly the most stubborn woman I've ever met. Will you accept my claim? Will you stand beside me as my Luna, my equal, my mate? But before she could answer, the windows exploded inward in a shower of black glass. Shadow wolves poured through the shattered windows, not one or two, but dozens. Their forms writhed between solid and smoke, reality and nightmare. Their eyes burned red with malevolent hunger. Protect the lady, Zephyr roared, shifting instantly into his wolf form. He met the first wave head-on, his massive black form tearing through shadow flesh with savage precision. But more kept coming, flowing through the broken windows like a dark tide. The room became a battlefield in seconds. Rosanna pulled Lyrelei behind an overturned table while the guards formed a desperate defensive line. They're after her, Captain Erickson shouted, decapitating a shadow wolf with his silver blade. They're specifically targeting Lady Moonfall. Indeed, the shadow wolves seemed to flow around other defenders, all converging toward Lyrelai's position. Their whispers filled the air like poison. The last moonfall. Her blood will open the gate. Kill her before she remembers. What gate? Lyrelai demanded, but her words were lost in the chaos. A massive shadow wolf, larger than the others, materialized directly in front of her. Its form was more solid, more real, an alpha among shadows. You should have stayed hidden, little moon child. Now you'll die like your family. It lunged, jaws wide enough to swallow her whole. Lyrelai raised her hands instinctively, and silver light exploded from her palms. The shadow alpha shrieked as the moon blessing tore through its form, but it didn't dissipate like the others. Instead, it reformed, angrier, more solid. Your power is weak, it snarled. 8 years of suppression have diminished you. You're not the threat your parents were. Maybe not. Lirali stood shakily, silver light dancing around her fingers. But I'm still a moonfall. She pressed her palms together, and the silver light condensed into a blade of pure moonlight. The ancestral memories stirred again, showing her forms and stances her body had never learned but somehow knew. The shadow alpha attacked again, and this time Lirali met it halfway. Her moonblade clashed with its shadow claws, sending shockwaves through the room. They danced a deadly ballet, light versus dark, each strike releasing bursts of opposing energy. But the alpha was right. She was weak from years of suppression, from the torture, from the blood she'd given to save Zephyr. Her movements grew sluggish. Her light flickered. The shadow alpha's claw raked across her side, tearing through flesh. She screamed, falling to one knee. Lyrelai! Zephyr fought desperately to reach her, but the mass of shadow wolves kept him at bay. And now, the shadow alpha loomed over her. The moonfall line truly ends. No, Lyrelai gasped, her hand pressed to her bleeding side. Not yet. She slammed her palm on the floor and spoke words in the ancient tongue, words she didn't know she knew. By moon and star, by blood and bone, I call upon the covenant of light. Honor the old pacts. Remember your oaths. The moon mark she'd inadvertently given Zephyr when healing him suddenly blazed like a star. Every drop of her blood on the floor, from her torture, from her wounds, from saving him, began to glow. The light spread in veins across the floor, up the walls, creating a complex pattern that had been invisible until now. No! The shadow alpha recoiled. The sanctuary seal. It was destroyed with the moonfall estate. The seal isn't tied to a place, Lyrelai said, understanding flooding through her. It's tied to the bloodline. And I am the bloodline. The pattern completed itself, and the entire room erupted in silver fire. Every shadow wolf caught within shrieked as they were banished back to whatever dark realm they'd crawled from. The alpha tried to flee, but tendrils of light wrapped around it, holding it fast. Wait, it bargained desperately. You don't know what you're doing. The gate is already weakening, without us to guard it. Guard it? Lyrelai laughed bitterly. You killed my family to control it. We killed them to prevent them from opening it. The first shadow wolves were the guardians, but we were corrupted by what lies beyond. Your family was going to cleanse the gate, not knowing that would release what's trapped inside. Something worse than us. Something that... Zephyr's jaws closed around the shadow alpha's throat, silencing it permanently. As it dissolved, its final whispers echoed. The blood moon comes. 3 nights hence. The gate will open with or without us. Silence fell over the destroyed room. Bodies of guards lay scattered, some wounded, some worse. But the shadow wolves were gone. For now. Lyrelai collapsed completely, the moon blessing having drained the last of her strength. Zephyr, back in human form, caught her before she hit the floor. The gate. She mumbled against his chest. My parents weren't traitors. They were trying to stop something. The shadow wolves killed them to prevent them from cleansing the gate. But now the corrupted guardians are being eliminated, Chancellor Raven said slowly, horror dawning on his face. Which means nothing stands between us and whatever they were guarding against. 3 nights, Zephyr said grimly. The blood moon rises in 3 nights. We need answers. Lyrelei forced herself to focus despite the pain. My family's estate. There's a hidden archive beneath the ruins. My mother told me about it before. Before the end. If there are answers, they'll be there. You're in no condition to travel. I'm the only one who can open it. She met his golden eyes with determination. The blood seal will only answer to a moonfall. Master Healer Cassian approached urgently. Your Majesty, Lady Moonfall needs immediate treatment. These wounds, combined with her earlier injuries. I'll survive, Lyrelei interrupted. I have to. We all have to. Because if that Shadow Alpha was telling the truth. It was, a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone spun to see a figure in white robes, the Oracle of the Northern Temple. A woman so old her age was counted in centuries rather than decades. I felt the sanctuary seal activate. I came as quickly as these ancient bones could carry me. She hobbled into the room, her milk-white eyes somehow seeing everything. The Moonfall family were the gatekeepers, just as the Dark Moons were the defenders. Together, they held back the void. The void? Zephyr asked. The space between spaces, where things that should not exist are imprisoned. The Shadow Wolves were once noble guardians, but prolonged exposure to the void corrupted them. They became that which they guarded against. The Oracle approached Lyrelei, studying her with those unseeing eyes. You've awakened your heritage, child. But you're only half of the equation. Her gaze turned to Zephyr. The claiming must be completed. The bond must be sealed. Only united can you face what comes. I haven't accepted yet, Lyrelei said weakly. Haven't you? The Oracle smiled knowingly. Your blood already sings with his. Your souls recognized each other across years of separation. The moon blessing wouldn't have worked if you weren't true mates. She was right. Lyrelei could feel it. The pull toward Zephyr, the way her very essence yearned for his. It wasn't just attraction or gratitude. It was recognition at the deepest level. But the politics, Chancellor Ravens began. Hang the politics, Zephyr snarled. The kingdom is in danger. Which is why the bond must be formalized publicly, the Oracle said. The noble houses must see their Luna rise. The people must witness the return of the Moonfall line. It will give them hope for the battle ahead. Battle? Captain Erickson asked grimly. Oh yes. The Oracle's expression darkened. The Shadow Wolves were just the beginning. When the blood moon rises, if the gate isn't properly sealed, armies of the void will pour through. Every nightmare humanity has ever dreamed will take form. She turned back to Lyrelei and Zephyr. You have 3 days to prepare, 3 days to gather allies, to unlock the secrets of the Moonfall archive, to complete your bond. 3 days to become what you were born to be. And if we fail? Lyrelei asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Then Valdris falls. Then the world falls. Then existence itself unravels like a tapestry pulled loose. The weight of destiny settled on Lyrelei's shoulders like a mountain. 3 days ago, she'd been a servant scrubbing floors. Now she was the last hope of the kingdom. She looked at Zephyr, seeing the same weight in his eyes, but also determination, also faith, in her, in them, in what they could become together. Lyrelei of House Moonfall, he said formally, still kneeling beside her, still holding her hand. I know the circumstances are impossible. I know we barely know each other beyond 2 nights of saving each other's lives. But I feel it. The bond, the destiny, the rightness of us. Will you accept my claim? Will you become my Luna, my queen, my partner in all things? The room held its breath. Even the wounded seemed to pause in their pain to hear her answer. Lirali thought of her murdered family, of 8 years in hiding, of all the Omegas still suffering under unjust laws. She thought of the shadow wolves and the greater threat beyond. She thought of the man before her, scarred but strong, deadly but gentle, a king who'd taken a poisoned blade for a servant. I accept, she whispered, then stronger. I accept your claim, Zephyr Darkmoon, but know this. I won't be a decorative Luna. I won't sit quietly while you handle everything. We face this together, as equals, or not at all. I wouldn't want it any other way, he smiled, and for a moment, despite the destruction around them, despite the danger ahead, everything was perfect. Then he kissed her, and the moon blessing in both their souls erupted in celebration. Silver and gold light danced around them, and everyone present felt it. The rightness, the completion, the hope. When they parted, Lirali's wounds had healed significantly, and Zephyr's exhaustion had lifted. The bond was already strengthening them. Your Majesties, Captain Erickson said, testing out the plural. What are your orders? Zephyr helped Lirali stand, keeping his arm around her waist. Send ravens to every noble house. They have 24 hours to present themselves at court. Any who refuse are declaring themselves enemies of the crown. Prepare the palace for siege conditions, Lirali added, finding her voice as Luna. If the void creatures break through, this will be our last stand. And find me every Omega in the palace who's willing to fight. They've been oppressed long enough. Time they had a chance to defend themselves. The Moonfall Estate, Zephyr continued. Prepare a convoy. We leave at dawn. And spread the word, Lirali said, her silver eyes blazing with determination. The last moonfall has returned. The shadow wolves are defeated. And in 3 days, when the blood moon rises, we'll show the void itself why humanity has survived this long. We're not prey, Zephyr added, his golden eyes equally fierce. We're predators. And it's time we reminded the darkness why it should fear the light. The crowd that had gathered, servants, guards, nobles who'd followed from the amphitheater, began to cheer. Word spread like wildfire through the palace, through the city, through the kingdom. The Omega who'd been condemned to death was now their Luna. The king who'd hidden for 3 years had returned in full force, and together, they would face the apocalypse itself. Dawn came too quickly, painting the sky the color of blood, an ominous preview of the blood moon to come. Lirali stood on the palace balcony, now dressed in the midnight blue and silver robes of House Moonfall, restored from the royal vault. The fabric whispered with old magic, strengthening her weakened moon blessing. The convoy is ready, Zephyr said, approaching from behind. He wore his battle armor, black steel that seemed to absorb light, marked with the golden crescent of his house. 30 of our best warriors, the Oracle, and... He paused. 400 Omegas who answered your call. Lirali turned, surprised. 400? Every Omega in the palace and half from the city below. They're calling you the Liberator. Word has spread about what you said, that they deserve to defend themselves. Through their new bond, she felt his mix of pride and concern. You think I'm wrong to arm them? I think you're right to give them choice, he replied carefully. But they're untrained. Against void creatures. Then we train them. We have 2 days. She moved to the balcony rail, looking down at the courtyard where omegas of all ages gathered, some barely adults, others weathered by decades of servitude. Besides, desperation breeds innovation. They've survived systematic oppression. That takes its own kind of strength. Rosanna approached, now wearing the formal garb of a moonfall retainer. "My lady, I've found something you should see." She held out a leather journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Your mother's personal notes. I've kept them hidden all these years." Lyrelai's hands trembled as she took the journal. Her mother's handwriting filled the pages, elegant, precise, achingly familiar. She opened to a marked page and read aloud. "The Void Gate isn't just a doorway, it's a wound in reality itself. Created eons ago when the first shadow mages tried to access unlimited power. They tore a hole between dimensions, and things that should never exist began pouring through. Our ancestors, Moonfall and Darkmoon, sacrificed much to create the seal. But seals weaken. The Shadow Wolves know this. They've been preparing for centuries, corrupting our institutions, weakening our bloodlines, ensuring that when the time came, no one would be strong enough to stop them." "But we stopped them," Zephyr pointed out. "No," the Oracle said, having approached silently. "You revealed them. Killed their agents, but their plan might still succeed through their absence." She pointed to another passage. "Read on, child." Lyrelai continued. "The seal requires 2 keys, Moonfall Silver and Dark Moon Gold, united in perfect harmony. But more than that, it requires sacrifice. The first seal costs the lives of 20 from each bloodline. What price will resealing demand?" Silence fell over the group. "We won't know until we reach the gate," the Oracle said quietly. "But your mother was wise to prepare for the worst." A commotion in the courtyard drew their attention. Several noble houses had arrived, their carriages bearing flags of submission. But one stood apart. Lord Garrett of House Thornridge, his face twisted with disdain. "I demand an audience," he shouted up at the balcony. "This farce has gone far enough." Zephyr's expression darkened, but Lirali placed a hand on his arm. "Let me handle this." It's time the nobles understood their new Luna. She descended to the courtyard, her robes billowing behind her. The crowd parted, omegas bowing while nobles watched with varying degrees of hostility and curiosity. "Lord Garrett," she said coolly, "you have something to say?" "You're an omega," he spat. "I don't care what bloodline you claim. You submitted to that designation for 8 years. You cleaned our floors. And now you stand as Luna?" "Yes," Lyrali said simply. "I survived. I endured. I learned the true nature of our kingdom from its lowest point. Tell me, Lord Garrett, what have you done besides inherit your father's titles and grow fat on the labor of others?" His face purpled. "How dare—" "I dare because I am Luna. I dare because in 2 days, when the void opens, your prestigious bloodline won't matter if you can't hold a sword. I dare because the omegas you so despise will be standing between you and annihilation." She raised her voice, addressing everyone present. "The old hierarchy dies today. When we face the void, we face it as one people. Omega, Beta, Alpha, these are just words. Strength, courage, sacrifice, these are what matter." "Pretty words," Lord Garrett sneered, "but words won't change nature. Omegas are weak, submissive." He never finished. Lyrelai moved faster than thought, her hand shooting out to grasp his throat. Silver light crackled around her fingers, not enough to kill, but enough to burn. "I pulled your king from a river when I was 17, she said, her voice deadly quiet but carrying to every ear. "I survived 8 years of torture that would have broken you in 8 minutes. I faced down shadow wolves and lived. I am Omega, yes, and I am your Luna. The two are not contradictory. She released him, and he fell gasping to his knees. Anyone else have concerns about my designation? Silence. Good. Then listen well. Every person here, noble, servant, warrior, crafter, will be needed. The void doesn't discriminate. It consumes all equally. Our only chance is unity. The Luna speaks truth, a new voice said. Lord Commander Fennec of the Eastern Marches stepped forward, his gray beard marking him as one of the kingdom's most respected warriors. I have fought shadow creatures at the borders for 40 years. They never cared if their victims were Alpha or Omega. Dead is dead. He knelt before Lyrelai, his armor creaking. House Fenwick stands with the crown. With both our Luna and our king. One by one, other houses followed, some reluctantly, others with genuine respect. But Lyrelai noticed the gaps, the houses that hadn't come. How many refused the summons? She asked Captain Erickson quietly. 7 major houses, 12 minor. They're fortifying their estates, preparing to ride out whatever comes. Fools, Zephyr growled, having joined them. They think stone walls will stop the void? Let them try, Lyrelai said coldly. We have more pressing concerns. We need to move. As the convoy prepared to depart, an Omega girl, no more than 16, approached hesitantly. Luna, my name is Seraphina. I want to fight, but I don't know how. Lyrelai saw herself 8 years ago, young, terrified, but determined. What's your gift, Seraphina? All Omegas have one, even if it's been suppressed. I can feel things, emotions, intentions. Sometimes, I know what people will do before they do it. Empathic precognition, the oracle said, having overheard. Extraordinarily rare. Extraordinarily useful against creatures of pure malevolence. Will you teach her? Lyrelai asked the oracle. If she's willing to learn. The gift comes with a price, feeling the enemy's hatred so strongly it can break your mind. Seraphina lifted her chin. I'm willing. I'm tired of being afraid. Then you ride with us, Lyrelai decided. We'll need every advantage. The convoy departed as the sun climbed higher, a procession of hope and desperation mixed. Wolves ran alongside horses, Omegas walked beside Alphas, and for the first time in centuries, the kingdom moved as one. The journey to the Moonfall ruins took half a day through forests that grew progressively darker, more twisted. The closer they got, the more wrong everything felt. The corruption spreads from the gate, the oracle explained. 8 years without proper gatekeepers has allowed it to seep into the land itself. They crested a hill, and Lyrelai's breath caught. Below lay the ruins of her childhood home, Moonfall Manor, once a structure of breathtaking beauty, now a skeleton of scorched stone and painful memories. But beneath the pain, she felt something else. A pull, a calling. The archive, she whispered. It's singing to me. They dismounted at the manor's remains. The noble house's soldiers spread out, securing a perimeter, while the Omegas gathered in defensive clusters, fear and determination warring on their faces. Lyrali approached what had once been the main hall. The floor was cracked, stained with old blood, her family's blood. She knelt, pressing her palm to a specific stone, one that looked no different from the others but thrummed with hidden power. By blood I return, she spoke in the old tongue. By right I reclaim. By duty I descend. The stone dissolved, revealing stairs that spiraled down into darkness. But it wasn't empty darkness. Silver light pulsed along the walls, welcoming its heir home. I'll go first, Zephyr said, but Lyrelai shook her head. The defenses will kill anyone not of Moonfall blood. Even you, my love. The endearment slipped out naturally, and she felt his pleasure through their bond. I have to do this part alone. Not alone, Rosanna said firmly. I carry a blood ward your mother gave me. I can follow safely. Lyrelei nodded gratefully and began her descent. The stairs went deeper than should be possible, each step taking her further from the world above and closer to ancient secrets. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber. The walls were covered in silver script that hurt to read, and at the center sat a pool of liquid starlight, the heart of moonfall, the source of their power. By the gods, Rosanna breathed, it's all here. Everything they knew, everything they learned. Lyra Lee approached the pool, and images rose from its surface, memories preserved in liquid moonlight. She saw her ancestors, the first sealing, the slow corruption of the shadow wolves, and then she saw something that made her blood run cold. The shadow wolves weren't lying, she whispered. There is something worse beyond the gate. The devourer of stars, the Void King. It's been waiting, growing stronger, feeding on the seal's weakening. More images, battle strategies, weapon designs, rituals of power, but also a terrible truth. The seal can't be repaired, she said, her voice hollow. It can only be replaced. And the replacement? What? Rosanna asked urgently. Requires a living anchor. Someone has to become the seal. Forever. The weight of that knowledge crushed down on her. To save the kingdom, someone would have to sacrifice not just their life, but their eternal existence, becoming a barrier between dimensions for all time. Above them, a horn sounded. 3 sharp blasts, the emergency signal. They raced back up the stairs to find chaos. The sky had darkened unnaturally, and shapes moved in the shadows between trees. Not shadow wolves. Something else. Something worse. Void Scouts, Captain Erickson reported tersely. The gate is weakening faster than predicted. They're already starting to slip through. Form defensive lines, Zephyr commanded. Protect the Omegas until... No, Lyra Lee interrupted. Omegas. Form up with the warriors. Mixed units. Your gifts complement their strength. It was unconventional, unprecedented, but as the Void Scouts attacked, creatures of living nightmare, tentacles and teeth, and impossible geometries, it worked. Seraphina's precognition saved a dozen lives in the first minute, calling out attacks before they came. An elderly Omega man revealed he could create barriers of compressed air, shielding entire units. A young woman's gift of plant control turned the very forest against their enemies. They held, but barely. And these were just scouts. We need the archive's knowledge, Lyrelei said urgently. All of it. She ran back to the chamber, diving into the pool without hesitation. The liquid starlight invaded her mind, flooding her with centuries of knowledge. It was agony and ecstasy, too much for any human mind to hold. But she wasn't just human anymore. She was Moonfall. She was Luna. She was bonded to an Alpha King. Through their connection, Zephyr felt her distress and instinctively shared the burden. The knowledge split between them, still overwhelming, but survivable. When Lyrelei emerged from the pool, her eyes blazed with silver fire, and her skin bore temporary marks of power. Runic tattoos that would fade, but currently thrummed with energy. I know what we need to do, she said, her voice carrying new authority. But the cost. Tell us, Zephyr said simply. The blood moon isn't just a deadline, it's an opportunity. During the eclipse, the barrier between dimensions thins enough that we can enter the void itself. If we can defeat the Void King in his own realm, his death will seal the gate permanently. And if we fail? Then we become part of the void, and the gate opens wide enough to consume the entire world. The oracle studied them with those ancient eyes. A desperate gamble. The only gamble left, Lyrelei corrected. But we won't go alone. The archive showed me something else. Others have tried this before, heroes from ages past. Their spirits are trapped in the void, still fighting. If we can free them? An army of the ancient dead, Lord Commander Fennec said slowly. Led by the last Moonfall and the Alpha King. It's insane. It's hope, Seraphina said quietly, and her words carried surprising weight. I can feel it, the future shifting. This is the path where some of us survive. Some? Zephyr asked. The girl's expression was sad but determined. No victory without sacrifice. But isn't some better than none? The blood moon rose like a wound in the sky, bathing the world in crimson light. They stood at the site of the Void Gate, a massive arch of twisted stone in the heart of the Deadwood, where reality itself felt thin. The combined forces of the kingdom spread around them, noble houses, common soldiers, and Omegas standing shoulder to shoulder. 2 days of desperate preparation had transformed them from a fractured kingdom into something approaching unity. The Omegas had proven themselves repeatedly during scout attacks, their long-suppressed gifts blooming under Lyrelai's encouragement. Even Lord Garrett, his throat still bearing silver burn scars, had grudgingly admitted their worth. The gate weakens, the Oracle announced, her blind eyes seeing what others couldn't. When the moon reaches its apex, the barrier will fall completely. Lyrelai stood before the assembled forces, no longer the broken servant from the Crimson Court but fully realized as the last moonfall. The temporary runes from the archive had faded, but permanent marks had taken their place. Silver crescents along her arms that pulsed with moonlight. You all know the plan, she addressed them, her voice carrying to every ear. The king and I will enter the void with a select team. We'll have 1 hour. That's how long the Oracle can hold the gate stable. We either defeat the Void King in that time, or we close the gate from this side, Lord Commander Fennec finished grimly, sealing you inside forever. The kingdom survives either way, Zephyr said firmly. That's what matters. But Lyrelai saw the fear in their eyes, not for themselves, but for their Luna and king. In just days, she'd gone from condemned Omega to beloved leader. The reversal still felt surreal. The volunteers for the Void team, step forward, she commanded. 30 stepped up immediately, 10 from the Royal Guard, 10 from the noble houses, and 10 Omegas, including young Seraphina. Seraphina, no, Lyrelai said softly. You're too young. With respect, Luna, I'm the only one who can feel the Void King's intentions. You need me. The girl's chin lifted stubbornly. Besides, I've seen my own future. This is where I need to be. Through their bond, Lyrali felt Zephyr's grim acceptance. They both recognized the look in Seraphina's eyes, the resolve of someone who'd glimpsed their own destiny and accepted it. Very well, Lyrali conceded. Rosanna, you're in charge here. If we don't return, you will, the old woman said firmly, embracing her. Your mother would be so proud. As the moon climbed higher, the void gate began to crack, reality splintering like broken glass. Through the fissures, they could see the void, an endless expanse of writhing darkness punctuated by islands of stolen reality, fragments of worlds the Void King had already devoured. It's time, the Oracle said, raising her staff. Silver and gold light erupted from its tip, stabilizing the gate into a portal. 1 hour, not a second more. Lyrelai took Zephyr's hand, their combined power creating an aura of protection around their team. For Valdris. For the future. For each other. They stepped through together. The void hit them like a physical force. Crushing despair. Infinite hunger. The absence of everything good and warm. Several of their team immediately fell to their knees, overwhelmed, but Lyrelai raised her hand, and silver light pushed back the darkness. Remember who you are, she commanded. Remember what you fight for. They stood on a floating chunk of obsidian in an endless sea of nothing. In the distance, impossibly far yet somehow visible, rose a fortress of crystallized screams, the Void King's stronghold. "How do we even reach?" someone began, but stopped as the ground beneath them shifted. Spirits rose from the obsidian, warriors from ages past, their forms translucent but their eyes burning with purpose. A woman in ancient armor stepped forward, and Lirali gasped. She bore the silver eyes of Moonfall. "Ancestor," Lyrali breathed. "Last daughter," the spirit replied, her voice like wind chimes. "We've waited so long. The Void King traps us here, feeding on our essence. But you have the key to free us." The moon blessing? Combined with dark moon gold. The union your generation finally achieved. Use it. Free us, and we'll fight beside you one last time. Lyrale and Zephyr joined hands, their powers merging. Silver and gold light exploded outward, washing over the trapped spirits. One by one they solidified, became more real, more present. An army of the dead stood before them. Hundreds of heroes from across the centuries, all who had tried and failed to stop the void. "We have little time," the ancient Moonfall said. "The Void King knows you're here. He's coming." Indeed, the darkness itself was moving, converging on their position. But now they had an army. "Charge!" Zephyr roared, shifting into his wolf form. The living and dead surged forward together, racing across floating debris toward the distant fortress. The Void King's forces met them halfway, creatures of pure nightmare, things that shouldn't exist, horrors that defied description. The battle was like nothing from the mortal world. Reality itself became weaponized, twisted, broken, and remade. Seraphina saved lives with every prediction, calling out attacks before they manifested. The Omega with air barriers protected entire units from annihilation. Noble warriors fought beside servant spirits, all distinction erased in the face of existential threat. But they were losing. For every nightmare they destroyed, the Void seemed to create two more. The Void King hadn't even appeared yet, and already their forces were being whittled down. "We need to reach the fortress," Lyrale shouted over the chaos. "Then we make a path," Zephyr replied through their bond. They combined their power again, but this time not to free spirits, to become something more. Their forms merged, creating a being of pure energy, silver and gold intertwined. In this state, they carved through the Void's forces like a blade through shadow. Behind them, their army followed, using the path they created. The fortress grew closer, its walls screaming their approach. Finally, they reached it. The gates were massive, sealed with chains of crystallized despair. But the ancient Moonfall spirit stepped forward. "I couldn't open it alone before," she said, "but with my descendants' power." Together, Lyrale and her ancestor touched the gates. The chains shattered like ice, and the way opened. Inside was worse than outside, a throne room of infinite size where physics went to die. And on a throne of fused bones sat the Void King. He was absence given form, a hole in reality shaped vaguely like a man. When he spoke, existence itself shuddered. "So, the latest champions arrive. How tedious. I've devoured 13 realities. What makes you think your little world matters?" "Because it's ours," Lyrale said simply, reforming into her separate self. "And we're rather attached to it." The Void King laughed, and several of their warriors simply ceased to exist, erased by the sound. Attachment. How quaint. "Let me show you the futility of—" He stopped mid-sentence, his void face turning to Seraphina. "You. What are you?" The young Omega stepped forward, and Lyrale saw something impossible. The Void King flinched. "I'm an empath," Seraphina said quietly. I feel everything, even you. Impossible. I am absence. I am nothing. There's nothing to feel. That's where you're wrong. Seraphina's eyes blazed with inner light. Absence is just presence inverted. Nothing is just something reversed. You're not empty. You're so full of hunger it became emptiness. And I can feel the origin of that hunger. She walked closer, each step making the Void King recoil. You were mortal once, a mage who sought ultimate power. You thought if you could consume everything, you'd finally feel complete. But it never works, does it? Each reality you devour just makes you hungrier. Silence! The Void King rose, reality warping around him. I am eternal! I am— You're afraid, Seraphina interrupted. For the first time in eons, you're afraid. Because I can give you what you've always wanted but never admitted. What? Despite himself, the Void King leaned forward. Peace. Ending. The cessation of hunger. She held out her hand. Take my empathy. Feel what you've forgotten how to feel. Remember what it was to be complete without consuming. It was a trap, Lyreley realized with dawning horror and awe. Seraphina wasn't just offering empathy, she was offering to take all the Void King's hunger into herself. No. Lyreley started forward, but the ancient moonfall held her back. This is her destiny. She saw it. She chose it. The Void King, driven by eons of insatiable need, took Seraphina's hand. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. All the hunger of the void, all the consumed realities, all the endless appetite, it poured into the 16-year-old Omega. But instead of devouring her, she did something impossible. She forgave it. I understand, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as she experienced the birth of the void itself. You just wanted to matter, to be important. But you already were. You always were. The Void King screamed, not in rage but in recognition. For the first time in millennia, he felt something other than hunger. He felt complete. And in that moment of completion, he began to dissolve. No, he cried. But it wasn't denial. It was wonder. I'm dying. I'm finally dying. We both are, Seraphina said gently, her form beginning to fade as well. But it's okay. We'll become something better. The hunger will become fulfillment. The void will become foundation. As they dissolved together, their essence spread through the void itself, transforming it. The darkness lightened to gray, then silver, then began to solidify into something new. A bridge between realities, but one of connection rather than consumption. The gate. The oracle's voice echoed from the mortal realm. Something's happening to the gate. Lyreley felt it too. The void gate wasn't closing. It was transforming, becoming something beneficial. A pathway for knowledge, for growth, for connection between worlds without consumption. Seraphina did it. She whispered in awe. She didn't destroy the void, she redeemed it. The fortress crumbled around them, but not in destruction, in transformation. The trapped spirits began to glow, their essence finally free to move on. Our time ends, the ancient moonfall said, smiling, but yours begins. The gate will no longer be a wound but a doorway. Guard it well. Use it wisely. One by one, the spirits faded, moving on to whatever came next. The Void team found themselves standing back at the gate, but it had changed. Instead of twisted stone, it was now silver and gold crystal, beautiful and welcoming. 15 minutes to spare, the oracle noted with something like humor. Well done. But the celebration was muted. Seraphina was gone, her sacrifice having saved not just their world, but all worlds connected to the void. She was 16, someone said quietly. She was a hero, Lyreley corrected firmly. Age doesn't determine worth. Designation doesn't determine destiny. She proved that. In the days that followed, the kingdom transformed as dramatically as the gate had. The Omega Equality Decree was signed into law. The noble houses that had refused the call found themselves stripped of titles, their lands redistributed to those who had fought. Lord Garrett, humbled by witnessing Omega courage, became one of the strongest advocates for integration. "I was wrong," he admitted publicly. "Strength comes in many forms." The transformed Void Gate became a center of learning, carefully monitored but allowing controlled exchange with other realities, refugees from dying worlds, knowledge from advanced civilizations, hope from places that had overcome their own darkness. Leirali stood in the throne room, not the Crimson Court, which had been demolished, but a new chamber where seats were arranged in a circle rather than hierarchy. She wore the crown of the Luna, but beside her sat representatives from every level of society. "The old ways are dead," she announced to the gathered assembly. "We've seen what division brings: shadow wolves, corruption, near annihilation. Unity saved us. Unity will define us going forward." Zephyr stood beside her, their hands clasped. Through their bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute faith in their shared future. "The Omega designation remains," Leirali continued, "but no longer as a mark of servitude. It marks those whose gifts lie in empathy, in connection, in the subtle arts that we ignored for too long. Alphas, betas, omegas, we are all essential. We are all equal. We are all Valdris." The assembly erupted in celebration, not the forced pageantry of the old court, but genuine joy. Former servants embraced former masters, warriors bowed to crafters. The rigid walls that had defined their society for centuries crumbled like dust. Later, in private chambers, Lyrelay stood on the same balcony where this journey had begun. But now, instead of looking down at division, she saw unity. Omegas trained alongside Alpha warriors. Noble children played with servant children. The city below thrived with new energy. "Do you regret it?" Zephyr asked, joining her. "You could have had a traditional queenship. Luxury, comfort, isolation from hardship." "I had 8 years of hardship," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "It taught me more about ruling than any royal education could. Every scrubbed floor, every insulting word, every moment of despair, they weren't breaking me, they were forging me into someone magnificent," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rosanna entered, but her usual stern expression had been replaced by something approaching wonder. "My lady, my lord, you need to see this." She led them to the palace's lower levels, to a chamber that had once been servant quarters. Inside, a young Omega boy, no more than 10, stood with his hands raised. Above his palms danced miniature stars, actual fusion reactions contained by his will alone. "The transformations," Rosanna explained. "Ever since Seraphina's sacrifice, Omegas across the kingdom have been manifesting powers we've never seen before. It's like her redemption of the void removed some ancient limitation." "The suppression wasn't just social," the oracle said, appearing as she always did when significant moments arose. "It was metaphysical. The shadow wolves didn't just oppress Omegas politically, they bound their very essence. But now we're free," the boy said, smiling as his stars danced. "Truly free." Lyrelai knelt before him, seeing in his eyes the same light Seraphina had carried. "What's your name?" "Calum, my lady. I used to clean the stables." "And now you hold stars in your hands." She smiled. "Would you like to learn to do more?" His eyes widened. "Could I?" "The new Royal Academy accepts all gifts, all designations. You could be whatever you choose to be." As the boy ran off excitedly to tell his friends, Lirelli felt a deep satisfaction. This was the world they'd fought for. Not just survival, but transformation. That night, the first anniversary of what historians would call the Void Crisis, Lirelli stood before a memorial to Serafina. The young Omega's statue stood in the palace's main courtyard, her hand extended in offering, her face serene. "You saw all of this," Lirelli said quietly. "You knew your sacrifice would change everything." "She did," a familiar voice said. Lirelei turned to find the ghost of Serafina, not trapped or suffering, but visiting. The transformation of the gate allows spirits to visit sometimes. "I wanted you to know. I'm at peace. More than that, I'm proud." Serafina. Tears flowed freely down Lirelei's face. "You were right, you know," the spirit said. "Designation doesn't determine destiny." An Omega saved the universe. A servant became a queen. Love conquered division. She began to fade. Guard the new world well. It was worth the price. As the spirit vanished, Lirelei felt arms wrap around her. Zephyr, always knowing when she needed him. "She's right," he said quietly. "It was worth it. All of it." They stood together, Luna and Alpha King, Omega and Alpha, equals in every way that mattered. The blood moon had passed, but its light had transformed their world forever. In the city below, Omegas walked with heads held high. In the palace above, former servants sat in council chambers. At the transformed gate, refugees from other realities found welcome and hope. The old world was dead. The new one had just begun. And somewhere in the space between realities, where hunger had become fulfillment, where void had become bridge, Serafina's essence smiled. The rejected Omega had become so much more than Luna. She had become legend. She had become hope. She had become the proof that no one, regardless of designation, was ever truly powerless. The transformation was complete, but the story continued with every Omega child who dared to dream, every Alpha who learned to follow rather than lead, every Beta who found their voice. Lirali looked out at her kingdom, her hand clasped in Zephyr's, and knew with absolute certainty they had not just survived the darkness, they had become the light.